most of the parts came in for this old Laney. You can see I've got the new cathode bypass caps here and here. Everything I do on here, once it's done up top, I have to flip the board up again to make sure that all the connections on the bottom have stayed secure. So I'm not putting the screws back in for a good while. So I've got two cathode bypass caps here and the cathode resistors put back in place. 16, 16. That is a trick of the light. There's not actually a gap in that solder joint, but anyway. Shiny things and phone camera lenses. I talked to the owner, and originally this thing had 16, 16 for the phase inverter and screen nodes, and 32 for the main reservoir cap. The new cap, when it comes, will also be 32 for the first stage, the reservoir. But we're going to go with 30-30 on the screen and phase inverter nodes rather than 16-16. It's a minor change from the original. Will make the amp sound a bit more like what he's wanting, and easily reverted to 16-16 should someone want to in the future. On the bias, I'm waiting for the new trim pot to arrive, which will go from this lug to this lug, from this turret to this turret, which will give us a good bias supply. So from the HT, it'll go through this 221K resistor, which is a guesstimate value. That's probably going to get us in the ballpark. Then through the diode, and then these two eyelets are joined together, turrets are joined together. So we have 47 microfarad, which goes to ground. This eylet's at ground, turret's at ground. Then I did a 47K, 47.5K. I had to use these dales to make the span. And then there will be a 22K trim pot here from this point to ground, which will complete the bias circuit. And like I said, 220 and 47Ks. Those are my initial guess for what will probably be a good bias range. I've got a 39, I've got a 33, and a 56 I can try here. I've got a 180 and a 120 here, and a 270. So I know what the variables are. I disconnected the heater center tap wire. I'm going to float that and put in some an artificial center tap, which is better in terms of protecting the power transformer in case of a plate to cathode or plate to heater short on a EL34, which is all too common. I'll tape this off. It had the ground for the shield of the power transformer and the ground for the HT center tap and filter cap going to chassis here, the phase inverter, along with everything else. I have given a new chassis connection here, which has the fused HT center tap ground. We'll have the filter cap for the reservoir node here, grounded here, and then just the power transformer shield. And then I have another one here for the AC safety ground. The next thing I've got to do is I've gone through and I've added the 5.6K grid stoppers. The next thing I want to do is get this to focus. That is a really fugly screen connection there. And let me move something out of the way so you can see why I'm going to redo it. Okay, just heating that up to remove the screen grid resistor. It's just a big glob of solder. Made the screen connection, this wire, if I can do this on camera, just fall out. It was, I'm calling these solder spatulas to the bottom of this. And I'm going to redo that with some new wire. Just hanging on by a thread here. And the thing that first caught my eye was how the extreme bird's nesting and individual strands of this wire here. That's just crappy. So I want to redo that nicely. Let me do that now. All right, I've got everything removed from that lug. I'm being very careful not to burn the heater wire, which is perilously close to it. If that insulation gets hot, you get a heater to screen short, and that's not good. And I removed it on this one. And I'm going to replace the wire connecting the two screens and the screen to here. And I think instead of doing the beneath the board spatula connection, I think I'm just going to do this one top side. I could do all this better than new, all beneath the board, and beautiful, beautiful. But I think the owner wants reliability more than anything else, and it's a minor thing to do, and it will be a way to make sure that that very important connection is solid. So, and then this wire here just goes from this node to the next preamp node dropper. So let me get this all together. Well, two things. First of all, it turns out this is actually one of the choke connections, which I would prefer to have up the board than the tube socket, but it's just not really, it's not a good thing. I don't want that to be attached beneath the board, and then we always wonder if that comes disconnected. The other thing is I really don't like this heater connection here. It is so close, less than a millimeter from the screen because of that gap in the insulation. So I'm going to redo that run. It just goes to the phase inverter. And there's, almost no current from the phase inverter forward. All the heater current in this amp is at the power tubes. So from this point on, it can go down to 22 gauge, and I think it shall. So let me redo that real quick. Interestingly, this is yet another wire I've discovered in this amp where it was just tack soldered in place originally from the factory. It was never really soldered with any mechanical connection. If you want to know the difference between a Laney and a Marshall, Marshalls were much better built. And I keep finding little things like this throughout this amp that exhibit that, demonstrate that. All right, new screen connections all around. So the screen node from here goes a top side connection underneath the board to here, which has another wire, new wire going over here. And this heater run has been redone to the phase inverter. Notice that it's just straight bus wire for the rest of the preamp. We'll see if that's acceptable once we can hear it. And I gave these some mechanical connections. And this ground, which is an odd one, it's ground wire for both output cathodes, goes to this 10 ohm resistor to the ground here. And that was just tack soldered on. And the heaters were just tack soldered. This, was never built to be as reliable as a comparable 1987 lead Marshall. But by the time it's ready to leave here, it will be as much as possible. And I'll just have to watch out for any more spatula solder joints on the bottom of this board before I start to power it up. I am waiting for these two caps, this cap and the trim pot to arrive, and shipped 5 days ago, according to the company that I bought them from. Should be here maybe today. Of course, the post office says they're still awaiting shipment because their tracking is crazy. And I'm not a huge fan of resistors between output cathodes and ground. I know that this is a measuring device, this 10 ohm. I may replace this. I don't use resistors from cathode to ground to measure bias and amps because you also get the screen supply there. And those who do use such things, I don't think have any business being inside a live amp. I think that should be the domain of the bias plug kind of things. Anyway, I am so close, it is just painful having to wait. And maybe those parts will come today. But it is looking much better. You can see here, by the way, I did find I had a higher 100K to replace that Erie 100K carbon composite that was there. And once all this is sorted out, and I know the bias is good in terms of the bias range, we will see if the tubes that it came with are any good. I've not opened them from the bubble wrap yet. Seller said they were new. We'll find out what they are. And then we'll find out how messed up these pots that are filled with cremolin or whatever that gunk are, and whether they need to be changed. I spoke to the owner. We're not going to, if it comes to that, we're not going to mess with trying to clean them all off and spending 20 minutes per pot. We're going to get some new pots in there. Because they'll be returned with the amp if he ever sells it to some crazy collector. He wants the damn thing to work. And I have cleaned out those octal sockets as much as possible to get the gunk out of them. Hopefully, as much as possible will turn out to be what was necessary, because I don't want to have to replace these with these riveted in sockets. It's never fun.